everybody, how's it going? Hopefully audio's okay. As always, a new system, a new setup. Can't hear music though, which is a little weird. Give me a minute while I suss this out. I don't know, can anybody hear me? I can't hear the audio for this. But if it looks good, I'm just gonna go with no audio. Oh well. Anyway, hope everybody is doing well while I not very confidently start to stream. But hey, you can only see what I'm doing. Which is a alternate cover to issue 1. So this is the third time, I think it's the third time, I've actually done this cover. So I drew it, I did the blue line, I would start to ink it, and then there were various things that I didn't like. So I had to restart it. So this is the third time I'm inking this. Each time I did go back to the pencils and fix that particular thing. And it could be just one of those drawings that dies, but I refuse to let this die. So hopefully third time is the charm. By the way, my name is Fabrizio Aiello. I'm the writer, penciler, inker, colorist of Horace H. Hoover. Yeah, I don't know what's up with the audio, but I'm just going to move forward. Any issues, let me know. If not, I'll be on here for an hour. So as far as how far I've gotten, I got Horace kind of outlined a little bit. I have some of the smoke kind of roughed in a bit. Got this guy in a little bit in the book. So I'm actually going to jump over to this guy today. So this is a character from issue 1. Probably one of the first legit bad guys that I sort of came up with and designed. I just loved this idea of this very oblong shaped head, and he's kind of doing this smile, but not a friendly smile. It's a smile that you probably don't want to see. And I think I already messed up that line. But that happens. I have to admit, it's a little weird with no music at all. But I'll give it a whirl. Let's see, have I been reading anything, watching anything? I just finished Brian Baugh's latest Wolf and Batsy, which was issue 13, which is one of my favorites so far. He had a campaign and he fulfilled it. I think I've had it for like a week or so, but I just haven't had a chance to sit down and read much. Yeah, it's actually one of my favorites. There's some there's some cool, like, classic horror stuff that I don't know where he gets it from. I'm not going to say I'm not a horror fan, but I don't have, like, the encyclopedic knowledge that some people have with horror films. But yeah, Brian has this knack for just, like, this classic feel for horror films. I'm going to have to white out his teeth there a little bit. If only there was a Control Z. Well, I'll keep it going. I should have started on something a little easier before I just jumped right into a face. Usually, there's always parts of a drawing that they're just easier to sort of knock out. And if you mess it up, it's not a huge deal. But jumping right into the face, probably not a great idea. Like those big tentacles in the back is absolutely where I should have started. One thing I always wanted to do to make sure is whenever I was doing comics is there's sort of like twofold ways to distinguish characters, unless you're doing like outlandish sort of costumes or anything like that. And, if we take sort of classic Marvel style, how they differentiated characters 90% of the time was through their costumes, through hair color, hairstyle, things like that. But the thing is, when you don't have an outlandish costume, it becomes a lot harder, and you really need to come up with little ways to differentiate characters. So I'm like, well, I might as well do both of those. So a different face shape, sort of a different demeanor, we'll say, and I'll do different hairstyles. It's like whenever you're coming up with character names, you don't want to. It's weird. Is chat disabled on this thing or something? 1 second. I just did the default as per usual, but usually people are a little chatty online. There we go. Okay. Captain Goodnight, how's it going? It's been a while. Yeah, so, when you don't have elaborate costumes to differentiate people with, you really have to find as many small things that you can. Sometimes that's just making somebody a little bald. Have a specific balding pattern. You can, as opposed to full head of hair meets Lex Luthor, completely bald. Let's give him a very unique balding pattern, which just adds to the uniqueness of the character whenever you're drawing it. So it's definitely one of the more interesting aspects of doing characters. Like Horus is pretty unique, sure. He's got the helmet and he's got some stuff, but ultimately he's still only wearing a suit. So, you know, I can only do so much with these characters. These particular characters. That's not to say other characters aren't, we'll say, more outlandish or easily recognizable, like Slurp or something like that. Hey Marcus, how's it going? Thanks for popping in, appreciate it. I'm working on the last 3 pages of issue 4 pencils, and it is awesome. It's brutal, it's exciting. I just can't wait to finish them. But as excited as I am, I don't want to rush the last 3 pages of this. Issue 4 kind of, I don't want to use the word ballooned, but it's 38 pages of art. So it was definitely more than I was expecting. You know, I was shooting for 30, maybe 32 tops, but there are certain scenes that you have to let them happen at a particular pace. And yeah, you can control pace with panel layout, but if things get resolved too quickly, it feels rushed. And there was a part of the book at the end where I knew that if I resolved it too quickly, it wouldn't have been satisfying. So I had to add a couple more pages. And even then, it's not decompressed, so to speak, at all. It's, I think, barely under the wire of happening too fast. Sorry, sometimes I need to stop talking and ink for a second. Marcus, Gil Kane and Murphy Anderson always had a thug with just hair on the sides. I don't know Murphy Anderson. Yeah, I don't know that name. But yeah, that is a classic sort of thug. The hairstyle. It's just one other way to differentiate the characters. I was thinking about Twin Peaks recently because of, a few things. But anyway, one of the most difficult things in watching Twin Peaks was how similar some of the characters looked. All of these girls were roughly the same age, had dark hair, kind of had similar looks. So there were times where, oh shoot, I haven't seen an episode in so long, I have to pick up where I left off. And then I'm like, wait a minute, is that the girl that did this, or wasn't she? So there's definitely that fear. I did just buy a 1,000 page compendium of G.I. Joe. And I remember, man, it was a couple of months ago, I don't know when it was, but they were doing a Kickstarter for the G.I. Joe comics. And it was all of the comics, which I had only read a few, honestly. And I'd always wanted to get them, but you know how that goes. And this Kickstarter was a compendium. It was a giant, couple volumes maybe, I can't remember exactly. But I think it was $300 or $400. It was a lot of money. And I'm like, nah, as much as I want those books, it was just too much. But this compendium for like 1,000 pages or whatever was $35 on Amazon, which I could not pass that up. It was crazy. Yeah, the last G.I. Joe thing I probably read was G.I. Joe and the Transformers, the one with Jay Lee doing the art. That's got to be the last thing that I read that had G.I. Joe in it. I know there's new stuff out via Skybound and all that jazz. I haven't read anything. I don't think it's in my to read pile either. Hey, student OG. How's it going? Thanks for popping in. I appreciate it. Murphy Anderson was a longtime penciler and inker for DC Comics. He famously inked Curt Swan on Superman and drew Hawkman. That explains it. I know shockingly few like artists and runs from DC. I was like 90% Marvel. There's only a few specific runs from DC that I can think of. They were always good. I always blame my newsstand, but you know, if the newsstand didn't have it, I didn't get it. So, or didn't even know about it. So I didn't even know what I was missing. So this guy wearing the suspenders. It was funny because in my head I'm like, oh, I know what suspenders look like. And we, as artists, you all do this. We all do this, I should say. Like, yeah, I know what suspenders look like. They have like a band here and then it does this. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to Google it. I'm like, yeah, I had no idea what suspenders actually looked like or how they attached. No idea. It just goes to show no matter what the topic is, like, unless you have some reference, or unless you've drawn it before. If you've drawn it before, then you have that in memory to some degree. But if it's just something you've never drawn before or never really thought about in like a technical way, you have no idea what it looks like. Yeah, my to read pile of stuff is just, it's getting bigger and bigger. Currently only about halfway through a book by David Stewart, which is really good. He has a YouTube channel and has a lot of good stuff on it. I'm a big fan of his. The book's really good. You know, I highly doubt that suspenders would be a darker color than the shirt, but in retrospect, I would prefer I had done a darker color on the suspenders. That way it kind of stuck out on the shirt. So instead of leaving that for the colors, I'm just gonna actually black that out. Hey DC Miller, how's it going? Well, I just looked up at G.I. Joe Compendium. Looks like a good deal. Keith Gleason did a review of the Kickstarter thing. Looks great and actually is a good deal for the amount of it. Yeah, I was shocked. I'm like, wait, am I reading this right? And I think the second volume pre-order is for like October or something like that. But the same, pretty close to the same deal. Maybe it was $50, but it was, I don't know, 1,000 pages, and it's printed on newsprint. So it's easy to read. My concern with huge books like that is that if it's not printed on newsprint, it's hard to read because the pages are too thick, and you have to like break the spine and all that jazz. I actually just canceled my appearance, my table, at Three Rivers Comic Con. I was supposed to do it this year. I did it last year, but I'm trying to minimize conventions this year until I get these issues done, printed, published, and out the door. So I will try to do that next year or so, but I don't plan on doing any more conventions this year. It'd be nice to go to one, not have to worry about schlepping around a table and a bunch of comics. Alright, so this guy's looking pretty good, which means I'm going to move along. Maybe do up here, which there are times where I wish I really would use a pen instead of a brush, but pure laziness. But also, I'm always concerned that it'll look too different, and I might experiment with that a little moving forward. But I really, brush has such a distinctive quality that if I start doing pen in the middle of it, how's it gonna look? I'm sure it works for some people, but it just might not work for me, so I do everything with a brush because of that, which makes buildings and doing anything with a straight edge difficult because I freehand it all. You can use a ruler with a brush. There's a lot of videos on like John Buscema and other people doing it, but I've never really got that to work well. Hey John, how's it going? John's Long Box. Thank you for popping in. When I think Fabrizio, I think pure laziness. Well, yeah. I like to call myself lazy, but I like to think I'm lazy, at least. Marcus, the ruler thing is very hard. The old-time artist can do it. Yeah. I don't think I've seen any like modern artists do it successfully, honestly. It's one of those skills that just kind of people lose. I came across this Instagram page with some sculptures on it, and I stopped because the sculptures were really great. It was figure work. It was really, really well done. I'm not gonna say Bernini level stuff, but I stopped and actually looked at the page, went to the profile. I'm like, wow, this stuff is great. And then you see a video, and like you just kind of like I know he's not using a hammer and chisel and sand, like a sandpaper. I get that, but you know, if you're using power tools and everything at your disposal, it shouldn't just be really good. It should be the greatest thing I've ever seen at that point. So if he had been using a hammer and chisel, I would have been really impressed, and I'm like, wow, this is fantastic. I'm gonna definitely check this guy's stuff out. Maybe I can go see it in person. But as soon as I realize he's, using power tools for everything, I'm like, okay, well, like his skill level just drops. There's just no doubt about it. And that might be a little difficult and unfair. But I mean, if you go to the Met or go to some big museum that has some very old sculptures in person and you see what they did, I don't know, like the bar is set. And once the bar is set like that, it's very hard to just accept something else that you don't think really is up to that. Was that unfair? That might have been really unfair of me, but that's me. Let me think if can I think of a good analogy that that holds. I always go to music. That's a good one. Writers, like prolific writers or painters or anybody, like the sheer volume of what they did is impressive. But then all of a sudden, if you hear, well, they had apprentices and the apprentices really did all the work, or whatever the case may be, it just loses some of the sheen, we'll say. So I want to make sure I don't have any like really solid blacks in this background. If it's in the background, it shouldn't be nearly as basically dark. So the contrast should be a lot less. And as soon as you do a bunch of solid blacks, your eye's just gonna go right back there. So even if it is in like complete shadow, like if you were up close in this little town and it was in shadow, it would be solid black. The further you go away, it's gonna start leaking light. And it's just a good way to show distance. Marcus, I feel that way a little bit about digital art, comic artists. Yeah, I think digital's a little different. I don't know. mainly because I've never been able to do it. Like, I tried. Like, digital was actually harder for me than traditional, so I never, like, I didn't stick with it because it was just too hard for me. So in that sense, I'm like, I couldn't. Yeah, I don't know. I guess it would be more akin to like AI or something like that. Like something that does work for you. And I'm sure we are all tired of hearing and talking about AI. Surely. I'm going to be doing some watercolors or gouache soon enough. Going to be doing 15 like small cityscapes is my guess, or like we'll call it urban sketching, whatever. Which will be fun. You know, switching mediums like that is always a good idea. Plus, I don't know, doing like a one-off Horace H. Hoover cover in watercolor might be kind of fun. Watercolor is still one of those things that not a lot of people actually utilize for comics. There's a few artists that do it. I think I've talked about this before, but not a lot. It's 3:43. Wow, today kind of flew. Maybe it's the no music. So in going back to like the solid blacks, like this is the closest thing to you. This has the most interest in theory. So I'm gonna make all of the shadows under his clothing like a solid black. Hey Ben, how's it going? Thank you very much. Issues 4 and 5 will be done this year, or I will die trying. I mean that literally. Somebody will find me slumped over my desk. Cause of death. The official cause of death will be trying to finish Horace H. Hoover by the end of the year. And then I have 2 stories that I've been wanting to do for a couple of years now, and I kept on going back and forth between them. I think I know which one I want to do. And it's based solely on the fact that it can be an episodic story. The story that I've been talking about for a while was like a dark fantasy. I was really excited about it, but it's a graphic novel length, and I didn't want to jump into something after this 5-issue miniseries that was that much of a commitment. So this other story I've been working on, it can absolutely be episodic. I can, just sort of classic episodic storytelling, self-contained issues. So I'm almost positive that's what I'm going to do. Now this is one thing I haven't talked about at all, and I actually don't plan on mentioning it until it's until I have some maybe promo art or something. You just don't know. It could end up a terrible, like, Seth Rogen TV show. Actually, that didn't need to be said. Anything Seth Rogen is terrible, so I could have just said Seth Rogen. I didn't have to add terrible in there. Ben, what ink are you using? Looks like a solid black. So, unfortunately, I kind of mix inks. It's like I have Speedball, I have Ian Boards has their own black. I think it's called, I can't think of what that's called either. So I kind of just dump ink in as I need it. And if it's too thick, I water it down. If it's too thin, I just let it dry out a little bit. I wish I had a recipe. I used to try to do a recipe a long time ago, and it just never worked out. So now I kind of throw up my hands in the air and say, you know what? I'm gonna work with what I have and kind of fiddle with it. And like if I put ink down on the page and it's not a solid black at all, then I'll just leave the bottle out, let it dry, come back to it, test it out. It's kind of a pain in the butt. John, rereading Mountains of Madness, picking up new details. Yeah, that's a good one. It's been a long time since I sat down and reread it, to be honest. It was definitely one of my favorites with some caveats. Like when I remember first reading it when I was pretty young, it was pretty boring for quite a bit of it. Like it really was just it was like a travel log or something, but not in an interesting way. I didn't really start to like it until much later. And at that point, you really love all of those, all of that little detail. John, love that story. The history of the warring factions always intrigued me. I heard Del Toro wanted to make a movie about it. Would be cool to see his vision of it. Yeah, I remember him talking about it, and then he just kind of bailed for whatever reason. He does bail a lot. Yeah, I was bored as a kid. Now I'm amazed. Yeah, and the funny thing is, going back and rereading that stuff, I don't know. It held. It's like we were reading adult stuff as kids, so you can read it now as an adult. Instead of like I'm going back and rereading all of my Hardy Boys novels, which I want to do. Don't get me wrong. That is a plan of mine. It's just kind of cool. I also, after I'm done with issue 4 and 5, I'm going to take a little bit of time and try my hand at bookbinding a little bit. I've been watching videos and really getting into it. I haven't done anything though. So it's all theoretical knowledge right now, but it would be fun to sort of rip up some Horace H. Hoover comics and do like a hardbound custom book as a test. Because you can do leather bound and do gold foil imprints and all that kind of stuff. So it would be pretty cool to make that one-off custom book that kind of looks like a creepy book. You know, the book from the story. Which the book from the story isn't creepy, but you know what I'm saying. I never read Hardy Boys. I was an Encyclopedia Brown kid myself. Yeah, I loved the Hardy Boys. And I've been meaning to go back and reread them and see if I remember anything. I mean, a lot of those stories were so... I don't know. Like, I can't think of any, which is crazy because we read them all the time, but none of them stick out in my head, which is weird. Comic books absolutely like stick with you, but then again, with comic books, you know, you have pictures, you're rereading them over and over and over again. Like, it's not like we really reread Hardy Boys over and over again. Alrighty, it's about 4 o'clock here. Probably gonna call it quits in a minute here. It's funny that they've come out with a bunch of TV shows based on, because there's a Hardy Boys TV show, and like I think there's a Nancy Drew one, like all of that stuff. But it's always updated, gritty, modern take or whatever. I think it would be cool to do like a legitimate period piece versions of those. Kind of like, speaking of Lovecraft, whenever the Historical Society did they do Call of Cthulhu? Now I'm blanking. Yeah, they did Call of Cthulhu. And they only did, it was a silent movie because that's when the book came out. And then, whatever time period the book came out was limiting their technology that they were using to actually finish the movie, which I thought was a cool idea. Alright, this is not... Alright, I'm going to end on some smoke. That's always easy, right? Captain Goodnight, thanks for the stream. Look forward to the new issues. Thanks for popping in. Appreciate it. Oops. Wrong bottle. Sure, with Parker Stevenson and Sean Cassidy. Alright. So again, this smoke I have tried multiple times. First it kind of just looked like clouds, which you really don't want. So it should be more like black or gray smoke. And I could do a lot of that in the colors, but you don't want to leave it everything for the colors. If not, you'll just have these kind of what Marvel does currently. It's just thin outlines of characters and then painted everything else is painted, essentially, for all intents and purposes. And everything has a real, like, nothing has weight to it. Your book, your comic, your characters aren't going to have weight unless there are actual, like, blacks in the construction. That's something I'm constantly aware of. This might be a little technical, but I have this theory that there is a optimal range of blacks on a panel and then a page. And I was thinking about, so I'm a programmer, and I'm like, how can I prove this theory? I mean, we kind of all know it's true intuitively, but what is that? Is it 50-50? So I wanted to make an app that basically you feed an image into a comic book page, and it would analyze all the panels and on the page and just essentially pick out the white pixels, the black pixels, and give a percentage to see, is it 50-50, 60-40, whatever the case may be. And then it would be interesting, and this could potentially use AI too, is like, you feed in the best art that you think of, like Romita or Buscema or whatever the case may be, Silvestri. You feed that in, and then you start to see, it turns out that some of the greats all have a balance of white to black pixels of 55-45 or something like that. And then you could, like, if I'm doing, at the end of this drawing, I feed it into this thing, and it says, okay, you have 30-70. I'm like, okay, I could use more blacks. That's just a little theory I was kind of noodling on. I don't think I really have the time to build this app or anything, but it's an idea at least. It could be useful for everybody, but for new people too. Because I think the biggest problem is lack of blacks. If there's any artists or programmers out there that think that's interesting. Because as much as eyeballing things is fun, sometimes it would be, it's almost like having a tutor or somebody who will look at your art and give you a little feedback without having somebody to do that. Because I don't have anybody, to really show things to anymore. None of us really do, to some degree. Mainly, you don't want to put it on social media because a lot of times if you're working on something and you're looking for feedback, the chances of finding good feedback are pretty slim on social media. So I wouldn't even suggest that. That is interesting. There's no blacks or weight in comics. Yeah, it really is, without a doubt, the one thing that is just sorely, obviously lacking. And as I pick up these artist editions and these black and white essentials, I don't know, it's just one of those things that I wonder if there is an optimal amount. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to be a great artist just because you have the optimal amount, but there's a couple of pages of Horace H. Hoover that, in retrospect, I really wish I had pushed the blacks a lot more. And sometimes it would be cool to have something tell you that. All right, now I'm just about done, I swear. So that is looking pretty good. I'm keeping it loose, but I'm still keeping track of the light and shadow. So, these things do have form, so they're going to cast shadow. They're gonna have form shadow, and then they're gonna have cast shadow. The difference is I'm not overly concerned about the form shadow, and if people don't know what I mean, let me know. If not, I'll just keep talking. Because form shadow and cast shadow, again, are two really huge fundamental things that artists should understand. It's almost like if you understand that and you can apply it to everything, it gets you pretty far. All right, so I'm gonna do a little work on these things, and then I'll get back to penciling Horace H. Hoover. And basically, once I finish penciling these last few pages, I'm going to be inking, which is good, but it's a little difficult because then that's all I'm doing is just inking. So I always need something to pencil. You don't want to get too focused on one discipline, because then when you got to get back to penciling, then you're rusty, and I just can't afford that ramp up time. So that might be whenever I start showing some other concept art or promo art from maybe the next issue of the next book. Alrighty. Alright, I think I'm good. Alrighty, well, thank you everybody for popping in. I appreciate it. A lot of people watching on a very lazy, semi-sunny Sunday afternoon. We'll take a look at this. Maybe. So we're getting there. Kind of jumping around the page. Probably take a couple of hours, because these clouds are gonna be something. So probably a couple more weekends of this. We'll get that done. Also, if you are new to me or the channel, I have a comic book called Horace H. Hoover. Issues 1 through 3 are currently available on HoraceHoover.com. It's a 1920s, sort of like a cult mystery. Has some old school coloring in here. Some fun characters that you will never see anywhere else. check it out. And also, if you go to Amazon, I have a collected volume 1, which is issues 1 through 3, which is a really nice print-on-demand version. So I really liked how this turned out. It's about 99 pages, something like that. Some extra stuff in here. I have some letters pages. I have some fake ads, which are pretty fun. So anyway, yeah, thanks again, everybody. I appreciate it. And I hope you have a good rest of your day. And I'll talk to you later. Thanks. Bye.